Välkommen allesammans! Welcome back to the channel where we use the actual historical sources to speak about Norse paganism, and today we are speaking about Jörmungandr, or the Middle World Serpent, one of Loki and Angerboda's children, the giant snake creature that was thrown into the sea and so big it encircles the entire world with its own tail in its mouth. The creature that Thor is always hunting down and trying to defeat until they meet at Ragnarök, and they fight to the death and both kill each other. Did our ancestors believe in all this nonsense? Well, let's take a look and see. As usual, we look at the etymology, attestations, and scholarly theories. So the etymology first. Jörmungandr is pretty easy. It's just translated usually as great monster or great beast, but that's not exactly right. The word gandr means staff. It can also sometimes mean magic, so the translation of Jormungandr is literally great staff or great magic. That's about it there. Pretty easy one to translate, but I'll make a note that he's also referred to as the Midgard Serpent, of course, as we all know, and he's also referred to as Lögesheims, which meant the sea thread, like a needle and thread going through the sea. Hold that thought, because I'll come back to it later in the video. So that's about it for etymology and meaning. Let's look at the attestations. Here are some of the ones that Jörmungandr is mentioned in. These are the main ones. The Jörmungandr is mentioned in a couple of skaldic poems and other real small quick references, but nothing that gives any detail. The real ones that give a description of him is right here. So in Husdrapo and Hrimskvida, it speaks about Thor's fishing trip, which many of you probably have heard that tale. Thor goes out fishing to sea with the giant Hymir, and Thor uses one of Hymir's ox heads as bait, and he hooks Jörmungandr, and he mentions how the sea was almost collapsing and falling apart, and just before Thor strikes the serpent's head with his hammer, dealing it a lethal blow, the giant Hymir cuts the line and sets the serpent free. But in some stories, it actually mentions Thor killing the serpent instead of letting it go through. That's just a point there. There's a couple slightly different variations of the story. This story is also depicted in a lot of artwork from ancient times. Listing a few of them here. There's a few rune stones and standing stones that the artwork here is clearly depicting in this story. Also a note, some people have drawn very, very incredible similarities to this story in Hrimskvida to the Indian Sumandra Manthan. I don't know if I'm saying that right, but here it is. So this myth could be incredibly ancient, going back all the way to Indo-European times when we were all the same people. All the people from Europe to India all had the same language and religion 6,000-7,000 years ago when we were all one people. So very possible that it's very old. The next attestation of Jörmungandr is in Völuspá. Now, most of us know the story about the Ragnarök. One of the signs of Ragnarök coming is the violent movement of the sea when Jörmungandr releases his tail and comes onto land. And then, as we all know, Thor and Jörmungandr finally fight each other, and Thor kills the serpent at Ragnarök in the final battle. But Thor gets some of the poison on him, and Thor dies too after taking 9 steps after this. So the whole thing here isn't in Völuspá, that whole story, it's just bits and pieces. Völuspá is a very vague, secret, hidden meaning, like just gives really brief references and everything in there. So it gives some details, but the rest of the story gets filled in with details in the Prose Edda. So the Prose Edda is the final source that mentions Jörmungandr. It fills in the blanks in all of these other short stories that I just went over. And just be aware that the Prose Edda was written by a Christian a couple hundred years after all these other poems, so the reliability of the Prose Edda is always questionable. But anyway, the Prose Edda gives one more additional story that we haven't heard of before this was written. And that was when Thor goes to Utgardsloke, which is the giant king of the outer world, directly translated. So Utgard gives basically challenges Thor to a battle of strength. He asks him to lift a cat up, and the cat is secretly disguised as Jörmungandr. So Thor grabs the cat around the middle of its belly, but he was unable to lift the cat. All he could do, he almost lifted it all the way up to the sky. And then the only thing that happened is one of the cat's paws just slightly got raised up. And Utgard expresses how the result was expected, and he kind of made fun of Thor, like, haha, you couldn't even get a cat. But later on in the story, he says, he admits to Thor that it was an impressive deed because the Midgard Serpent was disguised as this cat. It was disguised by magic, so the cat, Thor, almost lifted the Midgard Serpent all the way up to the sky, and many people watching, when Thor just saw one of this cat's paws come off the ground, they got terrified, and they were scared, because if he would have lifted the cat, he would have altered the boundaries of the universe. So that's all the stories and all the attestations. It's time to look at people's theories. Now, it's pretty clear to me what Jörmungandr represents, and I'll talk about that one last. But first, I'll go over some other theories that I have heard in the scholarly community, but also just normal people, guys. It's not every theory about these things has to come from some guy with a PhD, I swear. Sometimes I have heard better theories from just some random person on Facebook than university professors sometimes. So that's why I make these videos. I want you guys to let me know what you think too. Type in the comments so we can all get our heads together. You don't have to have a PhD to speak about these things and come up with logical ideas. So I've heard some theories that Jörmungandr represents the equator, going all around the world like that. Another theory that I've heard is that Jörmungandr represents the atmosphere or gravity. It makes sense because that's what keeps kind of the borders intact between us and outer space, which Utgard represents. He represents the outer space or the outer world. I've heard some people theorize that the Midgard Serpent represents the Milky Way, so our galaxy. That one, I don't know, it doesn't make much sense. I haven't read too much into that one, but I've seen some people speak about that. But if anyone has an explanation on that, you can let me know. I've heard another good theory that Jörmungandr represents the core or the outer layer, right before the outer layer of the crust where we live. It's that inner layer where the lava are, and it makes sense because when that is disturbed, that is when there are earthquakes, volcanic eruptions, the ocean rises, things like that, exactly like it says in the Völuspá. So these are all fine theories, but I'm going to speak about the one that I believe in and it makes the most sense, and that is that Jörmungandr represents the protective border between our world and other realms and other dimensions. Now, this is not my theory, this is... I forget who it is, I'm sorry. It's some university professor that I read it a couple of years ago, and I tried to remember who it was. I looked in all my books and wasn't able to find out whose theory this was right now, but when I do, I'll put that name of the person in the description below when I remember. So the theory is basically that Jörmungandr encloses our world and forms a border between our world and the world of the giants and the world of the gods too, everything, all other worlds, and which is thought to be a kind of dimension that is filled with the devouring forces. That's what the realm of the giants is. That's what Utgard is, and that was possibly believed by our ancestors to be in outer space somewhere. And that's actually what the Norse word for Jotun, giant, actually means. It means devourer. Also, Midgard does not represent Earth. We have a lot of different things in the myths that represent Earth. They didn't need one more thing that was that easy. No, Midgard represents our dimension. It's our realm that we are living in right now. So also, the fact that Thor is also in constant struggle with this serpent. So Thor represents a lot of things in the myths, and I'll go into them all in another video, but really quickly, he represents kind of the things that are related and have to do with electricity. Thunder is the obvious one, but also the electromagnetic field, also the electric waves and electricity within ourselves, the electric signals within ourselves and all living things. It's the electric signals that are present in us when we are alive and when our heart is beating. Thor can represent this life force in us, at least on some level of the myths. So that's why our life force, along with other elements of electricity in the world, is always in a strife with Jörmungandr, because Jörmungandr is the border between our dimensions and others. So it is our life force, or it is the Thor that is constantly trying to conquer the borders between realms and have more control about the dimension that we find ourselves in, that we're forced to be in. But just like Thor and Jörmungandr, our life force is never able to quite conquer this, no matter how hard we try to break through into the realm of the dead or other dimensions. Yes, our spirit can go there, our soul can go there, and different aspects of our soul there. Remember, there are 8 different aspects of the soul in Norse, in the Norse beliefs, but our life force cannot go with us. And when we look at the stories, when Thor caught Jormungandr fishing and almost killed him, the seas rattled violently and disaster would have came if he killed him. And how about the other story when Thor lifted up Jormungandr disguised as a cat, and he almost lifted it up, and the giants were all terrified at this, and that if he lifted it, the boundaries of the universe would have been altered. Also remember what I spoke of at the start of the video, the other name that Jörmungandr is, Lögasims, which means sea thread, directly translated. Now, the sea in Old Norse poetry is almost always a metaphor to describe the universe, and Jörmungandr is the thread that holds the universe together. So it makes perfect sense. We as humans are, of course, able to travel into other realms when we die, or when we're dreaming, or perhaps other aspects, which I'll talk about in other videos and things like that, but we're never able to take our life force to these places. We might try to, but we never succeed. Our spirit alone has to go into these realms, and we are doing this today. We are still trying. Multiple dimensions have 100% been confirmed by science. We don't quite understand it, but the greatest minds in the world are trying to explore these other dimensions and these other realms further, just like humans have always done. Okay, so I'm not saying that our ancestors possessed this scientific knowledge and got into dimensional travel with different scientific methods like that, but they definitely possessed some knowledge about different realms, and they were always trying to conquer it. We don't know exactly how, although some spiritual rituals that I will talk about in other videos definitely give us some clues. The only thing that we know for sure is that if we are able to succeed and pass our life force through this border between dimensions, it probably doesn't end up very well. It probably means a massive disaster and altering the borders of the universe, just like Snorri mentioned in the Prose Edda. So I wouldn't try it, but let's see what happens when scientists today start playing more with these borders. They are doing a lot of experiences now that have to do with dimensions and realms, and let's see. Anyway, this is what makes the most sense to me about Jörmungandr, but let me know what you guys think. Do you have any other theories that make sense? Write it in the comments. I would love to hear. That's why I make these videos. It's so we can all put our minds together and come up with the best theories and find the lost beliefs of our ancestors. So that's about it for this video. Vi ses nästa gång.